The first Major League Baseball player was diagnosed this week with a concussion-related disease called traumatic encephalopathy. Cincinnati Reds player Ryan Friel committed suicide 1 year ago this month, and a post-mortem investigation found he had the progressive degenerative brain disease that has been found in several deceased NFL players. Athletes in every contact sport are at risk. As Gretchen Frazee reports, doctors are discovering what head injuries mean for athletes in the long term.
Hugh Jackson has been playing football since he was in 7th grade. He's now a senior defensive end and fullback at Bloomington High School North. But he hasn't made it through all those years of tackling without some injuries. After several hard hits during a practice earlier this year, he says he didn't feel right.
I noticed I started to get dizzy, and teammates noticed that my eyes were like wandering and everything.
After another hit, Jackson blacked out. The trainer sent him to the hospital with a concussion. Here's what happened medically. Jackson was hit with enough force that his brain shifted and hit the side of his skull. Imaging from mice brains shows what researchers believe also happens in human brains. Shortly after a head injury, parts of the brain's protective lining start to break down. As a defense mechanism, cells in the brain called microglia start to expand, trying to plug up the holes. The swelling can cause headaches or unconsciousness.
No two concussions are the same. So sometimes, yes, you feel it right away. And typically the loss of consciousness, the amnesia, or the seizure, being dazed or confused, these sorts of things typically are immediate and may be short-lived. The headache and the dizziness and all these types of symptoms tend to kind of creep on later, minutes, hours, even the next day.
Much of the recent attention surrounding concussions has been geared toward football, and for good reason. Researchers estimate high school athletes experience between 130,000 and 300,000 concussions per year. Of those, nearly 30% happen in football. Soccer has the second highest rate with 16% of all concussions, followed closely by basketball at 15%. That's why the state legislature implemented a new law last year requiring schools to tell parents about the possible risks of concussion in all sports. And if an athlete is suspected of having a concussion, he's not allowed to return to play until he's received a written clearance from a licensed health professional.
That has to be done by a certified athletic trainer or a doctor. And there's a lot of reasons why. Coaches aren't qualified to do that. I hate to say this, but there are times when they want the star player back in the ball game, and maybe the star player doesn't need to be back in the ball game.
But while schools can reprimand coaches for not following the law, there are no legal consequences if a coach puts an athlete back in. And much of the time, there's not a licensed health professional on hand.
Many of our rural schools struggle with having somebody at even their varsity events, let alone sub-varsity events.
But if an athlete doesn't get the proper clearance before returning to play, there could be serious consequences for that player's health.
If you're suffering the effects of the first concussion and you get a second blow to the head or blow causing concussion symptoms, then the body has lost its ability to, or the brain has lost its ability to self-regulate, and from the first injury, and then the second injury goes into a catastrophic brain swelling.
But most of the rules only help treat concussions. As more research comes out, schools and sports organizations are in discussions about how to be more proactive and minimize the risk of concussion in the first place.
You can't prevent concussions, but what you can do is you can look at, with regard to interscholastic athletics, you can look at the rules codes within all our sports and look at things that can be tweaked, things that can be passed, things that can be modified to improve the safety of the game.
That can include making certain contact illegal or minimizing the amount of hits athletes take in practice. Convincing athletes they need to take it easy can be more difficult. Jackson's concussion was actually the second he's had. The first was during a lacrosse game his freshman year. Doctors tell him if he has another concussion, he may have to quit contact sports for good.
It would hurt, to be honest. It's not a good feeling just to sit out for a couple of weeks.
But he's working to earn a spot on a Big Ten football team, and that's not something he's ready to give up.
As we just saw, there's been a lot of attention paid to concussions and repeat concussions, but there's a growing body of research that indicates multiple smaller hits can also affect the brain. Dr. Tom McAllister joins us now to talk about his research that was published last week in the journal Neurology. Tell us how you conducted your research and what did you find out?
Sure. We were interested in whether there were effects of blows that weren't associated with a diagnosed concussion. And the reason is that studying how many times athletes get hit and how hard they get hit, it became clear that lots of people were getting hit really hard, but were not having an associated diagnosis of concussion. So if we were seeing these kinds of changes after concussion, might we see the same thing even after these repetitive impacts? So what we did was we studied two groups of athletes, those who were hitting their head a lot, football and ice hockey players, and a group of athletes who were not hitting their head, so track and field runners and so forth. And studied them with tests of memory and attention, so cognition, and a neuroimaging technique, which looks at how healthy the brain white matter is, which is essentially the easiest way to think of it is the wiring of the brain, connecting one part of the brain or one nerve cell with another. And what we found is that at the beginning of the season, when you compare the two athlete groups, there are not a lot of dramatic differences, but by the end of the season, it's clear that they're behaving differently in terms of the imaging technique looking at white matter. So their white matter changes in the group that's hitting their head a lot. And the frequency and intensity, or how hard they're getting hit, actually is associated with the changes in the white matter. And we know that because they're wearing helmets that are equipped with these sensors.
So what does this mean for athletes now?
Well, I think what it means is that we need to broaden the scope of the discussion, as you said in the lead there, from simply being focused on concussion to, do we need to be concerned about repetitive head impacts, even in the absence of a diagnosed concussion?
So is there a point that these athletes are just going to have to call it quits? And if so, how do you go about that?
Yeah, great question. And the bottom line is I don't think we know that yet. This is the first step in trying to ascertain what should we be worried about, what should we be looking at. Is it concussions alone, or is it exposure to repetitive impacts? At this point in time, this is the first step. We can take a look and see whether these changes are cumulative, whether they are progressive, whether the brain heals itself over the course of the off season. And fundamentally, we don't know yet. But I think what it does is, as I said, enlarge the scope of the discussion a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, thank you very much for being here today and offering your insights. Very interesting.
Sure.